a lot of successes, and yet the next administration, the Biden administration, started rolling back a lot of those successes. When I spoke to you previously, you explained about the situation with Iran. Iran is now a much more formidable figure than it was just not so long ago. When you were in office, Iran now has chess pieces of offense against Israel in South Lebanon, in Gaza, in Yemen, maybe even in Jordan, and even maybe on American campuses. So your administration, when you were there, the Trump administration was suppressing the jihadist impulse, and now that jihadist impulse is much bigger. So I wanted to ask you about the changeover in administration, and then or you can agree or disagree, tell me, did that lead to the October 7th attack on Israel, the massacre?
Well, since we left office, the trajectory of the Middle East has been downward, and it's all because of policy mistakes. Unfortunately, the Biden administration, when we left office, Iran's GDP was under $200 billion. They couldn't sell much oil. I mean, they could, on the black market, this market, they could occasionally, do some transactions. But our sanctions were really backbreaking, really bankrupting sanctions. And then Biden comes along with his team, and they just stop enforcing them, so that Iran's GDP is now about 450 billion. I mean, now that's, for a country to increase its GDP in 2-3 years by 150%, it's unheard of.
Wow.
It's undoable, right?
Wow.
Nobody can do that organically. But they did, and they had all this newfound wealth. And what did they do with it? I mean, they didn't give it to their people. They didn't build hospitals. They didn't build schools. They didn't build roads. They funded the Houthis in their terror activities. They funded Iraqi Hezbollah. They funded Lebanese Hezbollah. They funded the Syrian militias, and they funded Hamas. And they made them all far more lethal and far more powerful than before. We've seen it. We've seen, unfortunately, with our own eyes, just what these rogue terrorist states are now capable of doing. And on top of that, on top of the direct, sanctions relief to Iran, Biden turned on the spigot directly to the Palestinians. We had cut off all the funding of UNRWA. He turned it back on more than before. So UNRWA, which the U.S. was saying is a humanitarian organization, we've now found out, unfortunately, they're a terrorist organization, right? They have actual terrorists, in their camp, working to kill Jewish people. But he turned on the funding of UNRWA, turned on other Palestinian funding, started giving more money to the PA. And all that money, right, what did it go for? It just went for more lethal activities. So, it's hard to prove a negative. It's hard to prove whether Hamas would have attacked or not on October 7th had we been in power. But I would say all indications are, without being able to prove it, no, it wouldn't have happened. Because Hamas just wouldn't have had the resources, they wouldn't have had the backing from Iran, they wouldn't have had the backing from Hezbollah to do this. And so, now as we kind of move towards maybe another phase of this war, maybe not, we're not sure where it's going exactly, but certainly Hamas has been degraded, materially. And people are saying, oh, well, we appreciate the Biden administration's help in degrading Hamas and coming to Israel and standing with Israel. And look, I do appreciate that. I mean, it could have been worse. But all that the Biden administration did was help Israel react to a threat that never should have been made in the first place. It never would have been made in the first place, I believe, had the Trump administration still been in effect. So it's very frustrating. Don't agree with any of the policies, violently disagree with this idea that you fix these problems by reverting to that stale, policies and foggy bottom in Washington of a two-state solution, which is, as I say many times, the mother's milk of the Democratic Party. They all believe in it. They all think it's the right outcome, every single one of them. It's a terrible outcome. It's never going to work. It feeds more violence, more frustration, more disappointment, more terrorist attacks. So yeah, it matters a lot. It matters a lot who's in the White House in terms of these particular conflicts. And I hope we have a chance to reverse a lot of these mistakes.